Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran trying to barter your publishing rights for Bored Ape NFTs, or else a scrappy upstart, trying to buy back your publishing from the indie label in Des Moines that bought it in perpetuity for $600, this is your show. Because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's the last Friday of July 2022, and I thank you for joining us. This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Damien who drove a Mazda Miata with spinning rims, and who was always trying to sell you Prozac in sandwich bags, even though you thought they stopped making that in the late 90s. And old Damien would charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. But it's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things now. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in. Hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music, and merch commission-free. Listeners to the Working Songwriter podcast can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Use the promo code TWS, the initials of our show, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live in the coming weeks, the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm over on my YouTube channel for Sunday Songs. That's a live stream. I'm live. I'm playing tunes live. I'm taking questions in the live chat. I'm taking requests in the live chat. It's a really fun, really interactive experience. I dare to say that we're building something of a community over there, including many people who are listeners to this podcast. So come on over and be a part of it. That's the first Sunday night of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern over on YouTube. Head on over to joepugmusic.com and click on the live stream tab to set a reminder. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a couple things that you could do to help. First, you could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon, you search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month for the show. Think of it as a voluntary subscription. A subscription that you certainly don't have to pay for, but that you choose to pay for because you dig the show and because you won't miss a few bucks at the end of the month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make an immense difference. So thank you to everybody who's taken the time and the capital to support the show in that way. And if you're not in a place where you can contribute in that way, it's totally understandable. You could still help out the show for free by either leaving us a rating in the iTunes store, which is free, or second, simply telling a friend about the show, spreading the word about the show. The simple math on those two things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. Okay, I'll end all the harassment there. I hope you enjoy this week's chat with Dan. Our guest this week is a prolific songwriter and folk singer in the mold of Woody Guthrie or Phil Ochs. Dan Bern got his start playing the folk clubs of Chicago, such as the Earl of Old Town, before striking out to Los Angeles to chase his star. He has since released over 30 albums and EPs. His songs have been featured on many films and television shows, such as Walk Hard, The Dewey Cox Story, and get him to the Greek. He's composed countless songs for the immensely popular Tony Kornheiser show. He's collaborated with Emmylou Harris and many others. Glide magazine says that his songs possess intelligence, savvy, and choruses one can hang a hook on. American Songwriter summed up his body of work as sometimes excellent, unexpectedly poignant, and frequently political. And at the turn of the century, NPR said that Dan Bern is rapidly becoming the voice of a new generation of folk music. Dan was kind enough to jump on the phone with me a few weeks ago and talk to me about his journey so far. Dan Bern, thanks so much for being a part of the Working Songwriter podcast. From what I can tell, you had a pretty unique childhood because you grew up in Mount Vernon, Iowa, which is sort of, I would think of it as rural, maybe farming country, but with parents who were very much into the refined arts, a concert pianist and a poet. How did your folks end up in such a rural part of the country with that being their cultural background?
Well, it boils down to there being a little college there.
Oh, okay.
Called Cornell College. My folks at that time were still recent immigrants. My dad was from Eastern Europe, my mom from Germany, and then when the war came along, my dad went to Israel and my mom to England, and then they met up and eventually came to the U.S. And my dad was a pianist and a teacher. So they, after, weird circuitous route, they found this little college in the middle of Iowa. And so that's where they went, and that's where I grew up.
What was it like growing up in basically heartland America with parents who were immigrants and maybe culturally different?
Well, I think that for me, I had to find my way in, to what was around me. And that was primarily through sports and music. I fell in love with baseball, mostly at that time with the lore of it, because we didn't have teams, out there, not the big league teams. So I kind of came to it in almost like a literary way, And then, it was the Monkees, it was the Beatles, and then what kind of allowed me to sort of dive in as a participant was then when I heard, Dylan and Oakes and Woody and Lightning and Hank, where you can imagine that you didn't need three other amazing musicians, around you in your bedroom to do this, that you could actually just do this yourself. And so that was kind of my way in there to the American culture.
And when you did start playing it yourself and writing songs and stuff like that, was there an outlet to play publicly?
I guess, probably not till college to actually play, do what we would think of as gigs. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, I had the kind of teachers that would allow me and maybe a friend to get up in front of the class before lunch and do ridiculous things and make up things and make up songs. So it was a very small but nurturing environment at that time.
Thank God for teachers like that. I mean, in some ways it can seem like a small thing, a teacher letting you cut up like that in class, but it's easy to forget like what a big deal it is at that age to have even that small of an outlet.
Oh, it's huge. I mean, because that's your whole world, I mean, if you're in fourth grade and you can do something ridiculous and get some sort of acclaim for it, even if you can't run a 10 flat 100. It's kind of a big deal. It definitely kind of set the tone, I think.
Yes, and kids in your class at that age have long memories for anything that you do worthy of acclaim in fourth grade for some reason.
I mean, maybe that's good and bad, we tend to forget some of those things, but maybe other people don't.
I mean, at this point, you've had so much varied experience in life that you can probably see how unlikely in some ways your upbringing might have been compared to other people. What sort of like artistic or musical qualities do you think that were instilled in you at that time growing up that are maybe unique?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I never had the discipline my dad had because he would practice the piano 6, 7, 8 hours a day.
Good Lord.
Trying to continually master the masters, So in a way, maybe it just kind of set me free because it's like, well, I'm not gonna do that. I had struggled with the cello early on. And it was really freeing when you can pick up a guitar and actually, because it's a song instrument, and it's after you know a few chords, it's relatively easy, And I probably never really learned anything on the guitar that wasn't directly related with playing a song, like this is the intro, this is how it goes, so I need to learn how to play that. I was never one of these people who practice a riff, for 3-4 hours at a time. I still don't play that way.
Hearing it described like that, it makes me kind of realize what a technological revolution guitar is in a way, because when you're talking about an instrument like the cello, a cello would be playing like one, maybe harmonized or bass line of a much larger piece of music, or at least like a quartet, let's say. Yeah. Whereas the technological revolution of the guitar is, if you want it to be, it's a band in a box.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, literally, you can learn it in a week.
You can. Yeah.
Let's face it. I mean, you can learn 3 chords. You can learn how to move your non-chording hand up and down in some, some sort of rhythm. And that's it, really. I mean, at that point, you know a million songs, without even that 4th chord.
I'm so glad you said that, because, and tell me if you've ever had this experience. There is kind of the experience of sometimes getting compliments from non-musicians that mean absolutely nothing to you. And to me, one of those would be if someone says, it's amazing you play guitar like that. It's just so cool. And what I want to say is exactly what you said right there, which is like, you could fucking learn this in a week if you wanted to.
Yeah.
There's nothing to it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you're on the inside of anything. When you're standing on the outside, it looks just, unbelievable. Like, how do you know how to do that? So, well, you don't really know how to do it, any more than you know how to walk. If you described how you walk, it would just, if you tried to teach somebody how to walk with like language, they'd never learn. It's like, you hit your toe and then you roll and then you kind of push off. And I think we're wired for this stuff. If you just know the little bit of, the rudiments of it.
Yes. And like you said there, it almost precedes language in a kind of, in our ability to imitate. It's like you see someone walk, so you imitate the walk, and you saw someone playing the guitar and putting a song together, so you just imitate that. No one explained it to you. Right.
And and I truly believe that everybody on the planet has the capacity to do it, So there's Mozarts, of course, in anything. There's Federers, You're not going to be Federer, maybe, but you can learn to smack a ball. You can, there's these few things. We all are dancers. We're all painters, and we're all song people. I mean, you look at a 3-year-old; they got it all. They sing their thoughts.
Yes. Well, and also what distinguishes those masters particularly is their ability to replicate that mastery over time. And what's interesting in what you're talking about in this ubiquitous ability that people have is it's like, well, I might not be able to replicate a Federer shot over time, like every time, but maybe every now and then I hit a shot that would be about as good as he could have hit it, you know?
Right. Yeah, he misses. I saw Nadal yesterday and Djokovic. They both missed like point blank smashes, you know? And it's like, well, it put you in there. You might have hit that one.
I can miss a shot like that.
I mean, I'm not saying that practice is nothing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I saw this Kobe Bryant thing, and he was saying, yeah, you can get up at 10 in the morning and then work out from 12 to 2 and then have a break and then work out again from 6 to 8 and go to bed and do it again. Or you can get up at 4 a.m. and get 2 more workouts in before those other 2. And over time, 5, 6, 7 years, if you keep doing that, nobody can touch you. You can't make it up in a weekend.
Yes. Yeah. My problem is that I've always thought like, well, I could drink 3 beers from 6 to 9 p.m., but if I started at 4 p.m., I could get 3 more beers in.
Get them in. Like I was listening to your podcast with Foy, so I feel a little bad that I'm not like 5 pints already in.
Tuned up, yeah.
Unprepared.
Well, next time. So you end up, after that time growing up and after college, you end up in the folk music scene. You at least have a cup of coffee in Chicago playing these classic clubs like Earl of Old Town and stuff like that. And there was like a music and folk scene there in Chicago. What did that look like on the ground at the time?
Oh, man. I mean, that was the first time I'd been really in a community of people who were serious about writing songs and performing. And, first it was just the open mics, of course, and then it was getting gigs. What? You got a gig? Where? And, we'd all come out to each other's gigs, and, well, it was I think everybody who does this at some point gets in a circle like that, and it's everything. So, yeah, that was the first one for me. And that was, I still, a lot of those guys, Andrew Calhoun, you might know about that guy. Mm-hmm. He later started Waterbug Records and put out a lot of, but great songwriter, Frank Tedesco, mm-hmm. Buddy Monlock, Buddy probably, mm-hmm. But all in that circle. So, it was it was funny because at that time, I mean, since then, co-writing has become the great sport among all of us. But at that time, it wasn't such a thing. It was just, we would get together and listen to each other's songs and be inspired and get pushed, It was a push.
Yeah.
Do you know, you were there too, right? A little bit later, but that was your first kind of.
Yeah, I got my start in Chicago, around 2006, 7, 8 or something like that. So there was still Old Town School of Folk Music there, and that was going on, but it was a little bit more. That was kind of like institutionalized, where you'd like pay for classes and do stuff like that, and I was just kind of more on the. I'm a guy that's going to work during the day and then go play open mics at the shitty bars type of deal. So there was still sort of like that idea of Chicago folk music, but I always felt like I was on the periphery of it, and it always harkened back to like the idea of John Prine and Stevie Goodman coming out of there. But for me, it was like, well, that was like 35 years ago. So there was kind of a disconnect for me.
Yeah, I mean, even in my time, the Old Town School was definitely like the institutional. Mm-hmm. I never crossed paths with them really, but it was the Earl and it was Holstein's, and they were still doing. Were they doing the midnight special on WFMT? Was that happening still?
I don't think so. No, it wasn't. But
so that was like the radio show midnight on Saturday nights on the fine art station that generally just played classical. But then for 2 or 3 hours, there's this guy, Ray Nordstrand, and he would play, folk music. And that included us sometimes. So it was a thing to shoot for. One night I was playing at the Earl, and there were literally 6 people in there, and it was real late. But sometimes you get going. Sometimes those are your best because you just feel like playing. And he happened to be there. So the following Monday I was up in their studios recording 10 or 12 songs, and they start playing them, and it was like huge,
I mean, that's heady stuff for someone, just playing around town. I really, so some of that stuff wasn't there by the time I got there, but what was still there is, and I bet you it's still there now, is Chicago is the coolest city in America to be young in. It's just really affordable. It's human-sized still. You don't need a freaking car to get everywhere. I mean, you could still pay. I was paying $300 a month for a room when I moved there. I mean, it's a really cool city to get your start in.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. I love going back even too now because all that those feelings just rush back in,
Yes.
Hanging out, just even Michigan Avenue Bridge and the Billy Goats underneath Wacker. It's just there's still a grittiness to it, but it's also just real easy, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yes. So I really associated, I found out about your Chicago time and getting ready for this interview, but what I've always really associated you with is Los Angeles, in that city. So what drew you out to Los Angeles, and what did the city look like at that time? Because it seems like when you moved there, it was still sort of the Los Angeles of Guns N' Roses playing club shows rather than the Los Angeles of alt comedy and alt folk music, which would happen around the turn of the century at clubs like Largo. So how did you fit into LA when you first moved there, and what brought you there in the first place?
Well, you're right. It felt like it was just hair bands,
Yeah.
What brought me out there, I think I was just ready to leave Chicago. I'd been there 5 years, and I felt like, well, I want to move on to I want to go to either New York or LA. Mm-hmm. And I knew New York, and I love New York, still do, but I didn't know LA really at all. So I thought, well, maybe I'll go to the place I don't know. I think the real answer is my girlfriend at the time got a job on a soap opera. And so she moved out to LA, and it's like, well, I guess I got to go too. So it kind of made the choice easy. It's like, well, this is what's happening. Mm-hmm. But it took really quite a while to find that same kind of community that we were talking about in Chicago, with a bunch of like-minded people who, wrote this sort of song, because it was hair bands, and I definitely fell out of place for quite a while until I stumbled upon it was called the Iguana Cafe in the Valley, and it was the open mic every Sunday, and everybody would have new songs, and I mean, Beck would be around. He was around that place. I think he didn't show up for a gig one time, so Tom threw him out. But and then it seemed like it started to open up a little bit, and then there were more places to play, and then you could actually get people interested who wore suits, and it seemed very important to have those people come out to your show because they had the power to legitimize you. Yeah. That was the thinking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but, so much of that thinking goes into, there is a mythos about that type of thinking of like, the guy chomping on the cigar in the suit is going to be standing side stage when you play a great show, and then they're going to give you a record deal and you're going to become famous. What's different about Los Angeles, though, is if that trope is true anywhere, it's kind of true in Los Angeles to a certain degree, right? I mean, people could catch a rocket ship to the moon if the right executive heard a record, especially that time in the 90s.
Well, it certainly seemed like that, and it was probably what kept a lot of us there. Mm-hmm. What I discovered was, so I went to one of those folk alliances around that time. I basically was so frustrated that I thought, well, I'll try anything. I guess I'll go there. Yeah. So I went up to Portland, and I ran into this guy, Chris Chandler. You know that guy?
I don't, no.
He's an amazing spoken word guy and wild, and we had the same kind of maybe, the Jack London, Woody, Kerouac kind of thing. But the difference was he was doing it. He was traveling. Little pickup truck with his wife, who was also part of his act, and they had a little shell over the thing so they could sleep in it, and they had a dog, and they were just on the road. And it was my own, because that's what I wanted to do, but I was waiting for somebody to come along and press their golden finger on my head and legitimize me and allow me to do that, and they were just doing it. Yeah. So I pretty much almost overnight, I just sold my car, got a van, gave up my apartment, quit my tennis teaching job, and just started doing that same thing. And really quickly after that, somebody saw me at a festival, and I was back in LA playing for these suits in their office. And then I think by that time, I was interesting to them, because I wasn't one of the people that was waiting for them to give them the nod, playing around town. I was out doing it. So that was a real lesson.
It's so funny how that works. It almost goes back to just this very primitive notion that if it looks like you're trying to get something from somebody, they don't want to give it to you. Right. You know what I mean? But if you got something going on, they feel like they want to be a part of that. And it's a simple concept, but I feel like we all forget that pretty often, especially in the world of the arts.
Well, that's right. And that's the funny thing, that, I don't know, I mean, you would think you would see that and then learn that. But, I still have to learn that over and over, it seems. But that's the lesson. Especially now. I mean, now I think it's more natural for people to do that.
Yes.
That's what you have to do. And plus, we all have recording studios on our desk now.
Yes.
Which is a big, probably there was a time when you had to, well, I think I saw you had to sneak in and get studio time.
Yes.
After hours.
Yeah. Whereas now, and obviously there are much cheaper ways to do it, but for $5,000 in the door, you can have a vocal chain and a guitar chain into your computer that are, that are comparable to what a lot of people would be getting in studios in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s. It's a true Gutenberg revolution for singer-songwriters to be able to record yourself with this type of fidelity.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, I take it for granted now. I guess we all do. But yes. There was a time where if I wanted to record one song with a guitar and voice, you'd have to make a bunch of phone calls and come up with some money and schedule and wait, a month. Crazy.
Right. I mean, I'm always joking around with my wife that if there was one business I would rather not be in than the music business, because it's harder to make money in. I'm always just like, at least I don't own a studio. Because that's a hard place to be. And I don't mean to laugh at anyone's misfortune, but it's a little easier to laugh, on the music side of it, because, we've had some tough pills to swallow. And that, singer-songwriters being able to record themselves like that, I'm sure has been a pretty tough pill to swallow for a lot of studio owners.
Well, now probably the studio owners have to write songs and perform to
right,
something to do in there.
And they're probably better than we are. So who's the joke on in the end?
They got actual skills, yeah.
Yes, yeah. But it sounds like, going out and kind of hanging your own shingle, playing on your own, that gets you in front of these sort of executive types. And then you were going to make your first solo record with Chuck Plotkin, who worked with Dylan and Springsteen, a lot of very, legendary records. What was that album process like for you, and what did you learn from that?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, I learned, I can't even, it was great. It was just great. Chuck, I mean, he's still the smartest guy I know in the music spectrum in terms of song and in terms of recording and in terms of connection and all that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time prior to the making of that record, we were at A&M Studios, where just a great place, but it was just me and the guitar going through a bunch of songs. And at one point he turned on a click track just to see what I would do with it. And I completely ignored it. I was just, it was like it wasn't even there. And I think he realized that this would take a little time because we wanted to do it with a band.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just the way that I imagined the songs, and that's how I heard them in my head. So rather than us finding a studio and booking, time and all that and dealing with all that, we just rented a house and begged, borrowed, stole, bought equipment. And so there was no worry about what time it was or what time we had to be there. I was just living there, and it was like 4 months, and I'd get up and have breakfast, and then everybody would amble over and we'd record songs. The drummer was in the garage, and we could see him on this little closed circuit TV thing we rigged up. So it was like that. It was as comfortable a first record of that sort that you could, I think, ever want.
What do you do? I mean, because it sounds like you have a pretty robust recording practice of your own at this point. Like, what skills do you find yourself still using from that session that you took away?
I mean, probably, I think when you go from nothing to something, it's like the biggest leap of all. Everything after that is like refining, and you keep learning, but so going from not doing that to doing that, listening back,
mm-hmm.
Listening, focusing on just the bass track, what's the bass doing? Do you want to play cello over this? Do you want to add a guitar part? Do you want to add a harmony? Just all those basics that we all do. But it was my first time in a real serious, focused way doing all that. So I don't know. It all kind of stemmed from that.
On the business end, what was it like to work within?
Let me jump back in. One of the real interesting things was I had a couple of like long, big, kind of big monster songs on that first record. The mm-hmm. kind of 7-8 minute songs, and one I had for years, probably 10 years at that point, and I had sung it hundreds of times live. And to record that one, we had to do 12, 15 takes. And, I was just changing my headspace every time, Now I'll do it as if Neil Young was singing it. Stuff like that, just like almost like an actor would have to do, and then there's this other one that I just written, and it just and we played it once, and Chuck threw up his hands at the end, and he said, "That's it," and that was it, So that I still think about, or that still reverberates with me. Some things are just boom and they're done, and that's it, and then some things take a lot of repeated efforts.
Well, and then it's very important to have someone like Chuck there to raise his hands and say, that's it, because it's so easy to become invested in the song or the process that took a long time and it was arduous, and not be invested in the thing that just happened magically, because you feel less ownership over the thing that happened magically. So, your ego almost doesn't get a stroke when you accomplish something that easily.
It's amazing to have somebody like that around. It's a luxury.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we have to do that for ourselves, or learn to do that for ourselves, because we don't always have that luxury, right. And it's hard. I can't really overstate how great it was to have that guy around, to just say when something's good or say when something isn't quite there.
Getting better at your instrument is an essential part of being a songwriter. When you play better guitar, you write better songs. It's that simple. How do you do that, though? Sure, you could get lessons from the neighbor who majored in the pentatonic scale at UPenn, but that'll cost you an arm and a leg. Or else, you could pull up YouTube and pay nothing at all, but that becomes the ultimate time suck. You'll end up sifting through videos of nerds unironically weeping as they recreate a Django Reinhardt song on a $3,000 cutaway Taylor. So what's the sweet spot in between? Peghead Nation, the online home for American roots music. They feature curated video workshops with world-class instructors on guitar, mandolin, banjo, fiddle, upright bass, dobro, and ukulele. They have levels of instruction that meet the needs of both scrappy upstarts and grizzled veterans. And most importantly, all of it comes in at a low monthly subscription that actual strapped-for-cash songwriters can easily afford. To start taking classes yourself, head on over to pegheadnation.com to check out their 50 available courses. Enter the promo code TWS to get your first month free. You can also send a gift subscription to the songwriter in your life, or to the player in your band who needs a not-so-subtle hint about their playing prowess. Peghead Nation. When you play better guitar, you write better songs. It's that simple. Dan Bern has made music for 4 decades, and in that time, he has produced over 30 albums and EPs, not to mention all of the writing he's done for film and radio. That's endurance. That's commitment. That's giving your life over to art. And there's a wonderful poem by Henry Carlyle that explores the most radical instances of commitment. It's entitled Endurances. A mountain climber turned evangelist confesses, hanging on a face I think like a fly, the slightest error will kill. And when I'm so close to death, suddenly I think of life. The lichen in the crevices burns with a pale green flame. I think with my fingertips and toes. No ideas but what I see and touch. I think of Lot's wife and don't look back. A sociologist tells of a soldier squatting by the roadside after an ambush in which 2 of his friends had been killed, weeping, wrapped over the simple beauty of a flower, the meaning of which was surely lost on the objective detachment of the unbiased observer, who could but wonder at the absurd juxtaposition, the blood in the ditches and the blood-red flower. I have heard a racing driver tell of hurling his life through sudden turns so fast he lost himself in stillness, became a cipher on the tachometer, the blurred shape of a bird in a dream of trees. And diving, we find a rapture in the depths when, perceiving our immortality, we tear off our masks and glide, naked and glistening, to our deaths. At that same time, you're navigating, this album was for a major label. What was it like to work inside of such a large institution or such a large, kind of more formal system business-wise?
Well, I mean, it was part of a large network, but it was the work group / Sony. So, I was dealing with these guys. I was mainly dealing with these guys, Jeff and Jordan, who had been instrumental in, some other people's careers, but they were just good guys, and it was funny because at first they were like, "Hey, don't ever worry about it. You don't have to do a hit. We love what you do. Just, we're not after that kind of pressure, And like three years later, they're like, "We need a hit." And then soon after that, the whole thing went belly up, and some Japanese conglomerate bought them up and got rid of everybody, and except J-Lo and
right.
But I got that little few years window head start, so that was nice. I mean, it's funny because at the time, I think I just felt like, yeah, of course I'm on a major label. It's like,
right.
Well, why wouldn't I be? In fact, I should have been some time ago. And now looking back, it's like, whoa, how nice was that?
Right. Right. Well, I mean, but it's hard to have that perspective at the time as you're going through it.
It's really hard, the people around you are going like, yeah, you're hot, man.
But music and entertainment also has kind of a nature to it. Sometimes that is a crapshoot, and sometimes, styles of music that were left of center just yesterday are the biggest thing today. Sometimes artists who you never would have thought as some sort of mainstream crossover hit, something just hits bullseye and works. So, I mean, it's not completely crazy. I mean, I think the entertainment business has had decades and decades and decades of stories like that have panned out in a way that made everyone there, generationally wealthy.
Well, that's right. And I mean, Loser was on the radio every 10 minutes at that time. And,
yes.
That's pretty left of center. And that felt related to whatever I was doing.
Yes.
I also think sometimes when good things happen, you got to just go with it.
Yes.
You can't question it or fight it or, am I worthy? You just like, this is what's happening. Let's go, because there's no, sometimes if I keep using these analogies to other things, but like there's this kid, Carlos Alcaraz, he's the new tennis sensation. And a year ago, he had to qualify just to get into the French Open. And this year he's seeded sixth in the world.
Wow.
And he's not even 20. He's still a teenager. And I mean, he could go, what am I doing? Do I belong here? But I think he just got to go, yeah, I belong here, and let's do this.
What was it like having to make the transition then after, your guys at the label who were promising for years that you don't need a hitman, they get axed, through some merger, and you're now in a place where, your career is in your own hands again. And that's also at a time, this isn't, 2019, 2020, 2021, where, there's the ability to self-publish yourself to Spotify or any of these other channels. Like, how did you pick up the pieces and move on?
Well, it was hard. It was an adjustment. I think there was some relief, to be honest, too, because I think there were a lot of things that I wanted to do that I might have felt a little bit constrained about, and so now I was just free to do all that. I don't know that things changed all that much. I was still touring all the time, recording all the time. This is just, I think what the cool thing, but it took a few years, quite a few years, but then other stuff started to come along, like writing for movies, writing for cartoons, which is great in and of itself, but it also, I think, allows you to imagine other things that you might be writing for, and maybe writing your own things that you can then use as vehicles to write songs. I was curious about your playwriting background and thoughts, and if you still harbor ideas about that.
It's funny you should ask. Yeah, I wrote in college. That's what I studied. And then I've spent the last 15 years making music. And I have really had the thought of late that what might be necessary for a creative outlet sometimes is just a switch of mediums. And I don't know that would be as aggressive for me to like head back to playwriting, because in some ways, that's not really practical for me. I got, a mortgage and 3 young kids, and, playing music is my living. But that being said, I think that there are short of things of changing from the medium of songwriting to, playwriting, something as aggressive as that, to what you were describing earlier, using songwriting in different mediums. I mean, you've written a fair amount for film and television, notably Get Him to the Greek, Walk Hard. I'm very interested because of the personal place I'm at in my life right now. How did you get into that line of work? Like, how did that even become an option for you? And once it did, how did you have to kind of change your working style to tailor your compositions for that?
It came about. I was buddies with this guy, Jake Kasdan, who's Lawrence Kasdan's son, and who started making movies at a very young age. And I knew him through the wife of Chuck Plotkin. Her nephew was buddies with Jake, so we started hanging out. And when we first started hanging out, neither of us had anything that we had to do. It was great. We would just hang out in coffee shops and play Scrabble for 5-6 hours at a time. Now he's, big mogul, and I don't think you could catch him doing that. But anyway, he made his first movie. It was called Zero Effect. Mm-hmm. And I had just made my second record for the Sony label. And so he put one of the songs from there as an end title song. It was really cool. Mm-hmm. But then and then years and years went by. And then one day, I was making another record with Chuck, and I had lunch with Jake, and he said, "Yeah, I got this script, and this is a movie. called Walk Hard, and he described the character of Dewey, who, went through every possible period and genre of folk rock Americana music over a long, his whole life. And I think before the lunch was even over, and I don't think he even had a script yet or hadn't finished it. He just had this notion. And immediately I put everything aside that I was doing and just started writing as Dewey.
Oh.
And this went on for a couple of years. And for those couple of years, every song instinct, every idea I had was filtered through this guy, Dewey. And there were some songs that weren't even in the script that I would write. And some of them they even used, So that was my introduction to all that, to working from script. And that's when I started doing a lot of co-writing, because at one point I had been doing this for months on my own, and this other guy had been doing it for months on his own, Mike Viola.
Oh yeah.
And then we met up, and so we became this two-headed Dewey monster. And we would hole up in hotel room, because neither of us was living in LA at the time. We would just come in and out and do this. And we would just write Dewey songs for, we would meet with Judd Apatow and Jake and John C. Reilly in the morning, and they would just throw out song titles. Weird, and we would write every single one down on a legal pad. And then we would go and we would write every single song. And the next day we would come in and play them for them. And then we would get another list of, and this went on for a long time. So that really was my boot camp into co-writing, into working for somebody else's idea of what the thing needed to be, and losing your ego about the whole thing.
Were there habits as a writer that you had to shed to be able to work in a creative system like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, just a lot of it, I think, comes down to ego, and because up till then, everything, I was the backstop. I was the decider. I was, I knew what the thing needed to be. And, and now there was not just one, but a whole team of people weighing in on that. And, revision. And everything I've had to do since then that was in any way like that, somebody's script or somebody else's idea, has been, I think, for me, informed by that. And I think, I just became a much, better and just my whole attitude changed about it, I think.
Does this have anything to do with, I mean, one of the things I wanted to culminate this interview with that I'm so interested in is, particularly at this point in your career, let's say for like the last 10 to 15 years, you've been so incredibly prolific as a songwriter. Like you produce a high volume of excellent work. And as someone like me looking at that, I'm like, well, I want to be able to freaking do that as I, continue on and to my career. And not everyone, in fact, the vast majority of writers, I feel like, don't do that. So is that part of your character and that part of your output a direct result of this kind of boot camp that you're talking about there?
I don't know. I mean, I think it comes down to honing, tightening up what I call your songwriting muscles. If I have a spark of an idea, I just need to see it through. I need to get some completion on it, and a lot of the songs I write, I don't demand that they, are some great, they might be the song for that day. I read a bunch of songs for the Tony Kornheiser show. And it's a kind of thing where if it's heard that day or that week, it's the greatest thing because it's right about now,
Yeah.
And if it's 2 weeks later, it's almost like a newspaper column in that way.
Yeah.
But I think if you do that, it's like if you do crossword puzzles every day, you're just going to get good at it. And then when there's an important crossword to do, the big Christmas puzzle or something, if you've been doing them, then you're ready for it. I mean, we all wait for the great muse whispering to us some amazing thing. And I think if your muscles are toned, then you'll be more likely to know what to do with it.
Well, I think that there then is much more of a through line between your father practicing piano 6 hours a day to what you're doing right now than you may have earlier copped to. Listen, I really, really appreciate you being on the show. It's a real honor, and I very much appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
It's great to talk to you. I hope we can meet up in person sometime.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Dan Bern's latest album is entitled Quarantine Me, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.